Welcome to Byte Size, a series where we talk to traffic and mobility experts, discuss innovation, and highlight business leaders within transport and city planning. Hello everybody, my name is Emily Bobbis and welcome back to another episode of the Byte Size podcast for 2021. Now, today's episode I'm quite excited about. I am interviewing who I would consider an absolute powerhouse of a woman. So today I'm really lucky to be chatting to Enrica Centorame. So, like many people who go and start businesses, Enrica, when she first founded her business, got the common comments, which is you can't start a logistics business, particularly not with a baby, and particularly with no business partners, and in a male-dominated industry, for God's sakes. So Enrica, the founder and managing director of Global Forwarding, which is a logistics company based out of Melbourne, basically started her business regardless and in spite of these comments. So she's been shaking up the male-dominated industry of logistics since 2006. Enrica is an advocate for procurement diversity and connects with Indigenous, veterans and women-owned businesses, utilising where possible diverse suppliers from around the world. Global Forwarding is the first logistics business in Australia to be certified as women-owned in 2016. She's also spent a lot of time in the USA studying the NMSDC model of supplier diversity and is actively engaged with policymakers in Australia to reshape the supplier diversity landscape as an effective fiscal lever in the economy, as well as for social impact. A vocal advocate for small business in particular, for the international trade community, with a focus on waterfront reforms and improving supply chain efficiencies. Enrica is also a qualified interpreter. She speaks like 3 or 4 European languages. She's also worked extensively with crisis teams around the world. She's also a devoted mum of boys, keen cyclist, and an active SES member in Queensland. And of course, hailing from Melbourne, she is a diehard Hawthorn supporter in the AFL. Now, today's topic is around the idea of breaking barriers and how we can actually consider the differences and maybe the weaknesses or the strengths of others that can be brought into a business can be used to better everyone as a whole, and how we can kind of connect better within the different people that work across logistics, transport and business. Enrica, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Emily.
So I really want to get into your personal story about how you got into logistics, because I found it really, really interesting. So did you just want to kind of go through that again about how you got into your logistics business and all of the minutiae?
So I was an interpreter for many, many years, and I lived in Europe, primarily in Italy, and I speak a few languages. And then I had a son, and it all became a bit too hard navigating a world of travelling, interpreting, and a baby, no family, etc., etc. So I made the decision to move back to Australia after being away for almost 10 years, and I was shocked. I was totally and completely unemployable because I didn't have Indonesian, Japanese or Mandarin. Therefore, I had no work as an interpreter. So that was it was quite traumatic in a certain sense, being, oh my God, now I'm unemployed. So I made the decision to go back to full-time study. I put my son into childcare, bought a home, did all the things that I had to do to make sure that the home situation was stable, put him into childcare, and I went back to uni, to RMIT, and I put the wrong course code.
Of course.
And of course you do, right? So attention to detail. So I thought the natural progression from interpreting for me, because I worked with so many diplomats and politicians, was public relations or international relations, because I thought, diplomacy, I can use in particular my French and European languages and so forth. Mm-hmm. So one course code digit in error, I ended up in transport and logistics at RMIT in Melbourne. When I went to the first lecture, Emily, you should have seen my face. I think I turned white. In a lecture with all men, and they were clearly, a lot of them were still in uniform, so military or in defence, and a lot of them were, they had come back retired, or they were getting back into civilian lifestyle, civilian life. The first lecture was all about multimodal transport system, and then the second lecture was about international freight hubs. And I'm thinking, oh, this is not right. I mean, what am I doing here? And I looked around and I thought, no, this isn't the place I need to be at all. So I went back down to student admin and I said to the lady there, I'm in the wrong course. I've made a mistake. I'm really, really sorry. What are my options? And she said, well, we're sorry that, the semester has started. We've allocated all the student numbers to the courses. So you'll have to just stick with it. Finish the semester, pass. She said, just get a credit. You don't have to get a high distinction. Just get a credit. And then in the next semester, we can then transfer that credit across, and then you can start your preferred course. So I did enroll in the other course. But then as the semester went on and on, around about week 3, I just loved it. All of a sudden I realised that the multimodal transport system and freight hubs is an international framework of highly regulated transport systems that all come together and moving things from A to B. And I think I fell in love with it at that moment. And then my fellow students in the class were great. My lecturers were fantastic. And I thought, well, and my family kept saying to me, in particular my mum, she said, you might not see the reasons now, but there's probably a bigger reason you're in this. Mm-hmm. I couldn't see it then. I just thought, I'm in the wrong course, just got to tough it out and I'll do it and then, change. So by halfway through the semester, then because I was working, full-time, I was studying full-time, I had 2 part-time jobs.
Oh, my God.
Because I was a single mum and, it was a bit tough. So I was teaching Italian. One of my jobs was teaching Italian at a school in Melbourne in Carlton, just near Melbourne University. And for adults, it was adults, not children. I did the children thing on a Saturday morning, but the adults I did on a Wednesday night. And there was this lovely couple in my class, a husband and wife team. Some weeks it would just be the husband, other weeks it would just be the wife, and sometimes they'd be together. And then it was because at that stage this gentleman was married to an Italian lady of an Italian background, and he wanted to improve his Italian. Anyhow, in conversation you just get talking as to what he's studying at uni, what do you want to do, how come you came back to Australia, all of these questions. So I told them what I was studying at uni, and this gentleman he said to me, well, I'm the owner of a freight forwarding company and I need someone who speaks Italian and who understands a little bit about transport. And I said, oh, hey, I'm just starting out. I mean, my knowledge about transport is very limited. I mean, this is 1996, so I'm thinking, my transport knowledge is very limited. I'm studying it now. He said, doesn't matter, you speak Italian, so, come over and see how you go. So I thought, oh, well, I've got nothing to lose. And for me, Tullamarine in Melbourne, you only go there to catch a plane because that's where the airport is. I didn't actually realise people live there because I'm completely the other side of town. So it was a whole new world, and I drive from the eastern suburbs to Tullamarine. And he actually said to me, we're not going to give you much money because you're all very new at this, but we'll give you a laptop, a car, a phone, and you'll get to travel. And I thought that all sounds great. So I started working in freight forwarding, and that was my calling. That really, honestly, that was just, it all came together. I realised why I had made that mistake, what I was studying, the work that I'd like to do, and that was a long time ago now.
Yeah, I think the only way I can kind of sum up the whole story, and even hearing it for like a second time, is just a whole lot of serendipity, really, in how it all turned out. And very kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say I'm a fatalistic person, but it does sound quite a lot like fate.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
As you started your kind of career trajectory into logistics, we mentioned when we talked last about some of the challenges that you had to overcome, not only just setting up a business, but also, as you talked about, with your personal circumstances, coming back from working in Europe and all of a sudden being unemployable. And then you kind of decided to come back and set up your own business in an industry that is probably not the most diverse, is the way to say it. So what were the challenges that you think were the biggest ones that you had to face?
Well, between starting working in logistics and setting up my own business, quite a few years went by. So I set up my own business in 2006 after the birth of my second child for different reasons. But freight forwarding, and you're right, logistics is a very complex beast, and it's not diverse. It's certainly not family friendly. It's quite demanding and at times unforgiving because we don't have time on our side. Things have to be delivered. There are time frames. Clients have penalties if things are not delivered on time. The pandemic has taught us huge lessons about supply chains. I don't know where to from here, but it's been an incredibly challenging year. So my experience in setting up a business was access to finance, getting the right talent pool, and of course, navigating the pandemic. So I mean, thankfully, my business was not in its infancy in 2020 because if it was, it would have not survived it. And, family work competing priorities is another pressure point because there's lots of travelling. So we haven't travelled this year or last year, but that would be a first. Generally, we've got 6 to 7 international trips and we're interstate at least once a month or once a week, I apologise. So the strain that puts on families is significant. Access to finance is huge. Emily, you probably hear this all the time from your guests on your podcast. And as much as I don't want to sound jaded here, I also feel that maybe not now, but generally in the past, access to finance for women was a bit harder than access to finance for men. Possibly, maybe. We had to talk about this as well because there still is evidence, particularly I can only really speak from the startup space because that's where I'm in, but there is still biases, particularly with investors and pitch decks and whether that pitch deck has been spoken by a man or a woman. So there is still biases, unfortunately, and I'm sure that there is still some in the finance industry, but hopefully a little bit better regulated, I would hope. Yes, I think now there is a broader understanding, at least that's the sense I'm getting here.
Yes. As we were, and it's in your bio as well, which I kind of went through at the beginning of the episode. So you and your business work a lot with kind of suppliers, but also other companies that come from very diverse backgrounds. So be that cultural, socioeconomic, financially. And this idea of breaking down barriers. So how can, say, logistics businesses, but also transport businesses or businesses in general, I guess, improve the process of breaking down those different barriers?
Any business can break down a barrier. Any business. And if we use the vehicle or the mechanisms of business to do that, everybody wins in a broader sense. So I made the decision to work with diverse suppliers, not everywhere in the world, just where it's possible, because clearly they have to be, in my opinion, they have to be tier one. They need to know what they're doing. I'm never going to place my clients' freight at risk of substandard providers. So I have to, use the right players in the right space. So in 2016, when I came back from the States after having attended a supplier diversity conference, on that delegation, I met an Indigenous business owner, and he had an interest in a transport company. So we started kind of flirting with the idea that we could work together, and let's just see how this works. So I kind of gave them I carved out a bit of business that it didn't really matter who was taking care of because it wasn't risky business. And I thought I'll just start low risk, something that won't be too difficult for them and too risky for us. So it was just a handful of containers here and there. And these guys did an outstanding job. So that was my test run in 2016. Then in 2017, we did a bit more work together. And the company is called Winangali Logistics. And they're based in Brisbane. And the owner is Noel Nidri. He's Indigenous and is a fabulous guy. So then we decided that we were actually doing some really cool stuff and we should have a heads of agreement and really formalise our alliance. And we did that. So it's the first of its kind in Australia. It's an Indigenous-owned and a woman-owned business coming together. And it's a great story as well. And it's a good story because we have broken down some barriers. And we have similar stories. They've had, we have similar stories as we're both minority businesses and underutilised as well. So once and together we create a block. So we can be just as good as a toll moving, 1,000 containers a year because we have worked together and we've got the infrastructure, we've got all the contracts in place. So that's one way of breaking down barriers as well. And also Winangali Logistics made the commitment to employ more Indigenous youth, which has been great. And I've made the commitment to employ where I can women or not just women, but people who can't work full-time for whatever reason, because there is very little full-time work in logistics. So this is just a service offering that I'd like global forwarding to change the footprint. And I've always thought better to have 80% of something great than 100% of something bad.
Yeah, totally. And it's a really interesting story as well. It's because you hear a lot in business at the moment, these ideas of CSR and CSV, so the socially responsible businesses. But it's good that there's this socially conscious aspect to it as well, particularly in an industry that was kind of perceived as being kind of very male dominated and not as diverse as what it could have been.
Yes.
So on the back of that, how have these experiences shaped you and also, I think, by extension, your business and your career trajectory, although that is still obviously continuing?
Yeah, so going through the certification process was the best decision I ever made. It's put us in a completely different league. So we can work with tier 1 companies. So basically the certification, just for the benefit of your listeners, Emily, is that to become a certified supplier or a vendor, depending on, because in the United States they use the term vendor, you have to go through a certification process in order to get that accreditation. So in the United States there's an organisation called We Connect International, and they are the certifying body for women-owned businesses. Now, We Connect International, they're set up in Australia as well, because I met the Australian people through the people in the States, and I went through the whole certification process. So basically the auditor comes out to your office, goes through all your books, bank statements, the trust deed, all the companies set up, because before they certify you and put you on a register where all the big players look for their suppliers, they have to be sure that you have, as a business, sufficient working capital, all checks and balances in place, processes, procedures, training registers, training manuals. It's a bit like an ISO, but to a lesser degree. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, they have to certify that the woman in the business is the owner and runs and controls. So 51% is their minimum.
Totally.
In order to certify. So then you get your certification and you go onto a register. And normally we chase business. Normally we have to really chase business aggressively. It's the hunt.
Yeah.
Whereas how it's changed is that we are contacted by organisations who say, in order to satisfy our board and our compliance and our international and this and that and whatever, our governance committee, we have to work with a diverse supplier. And we have to spend 250,000 or $500,000 or whatever the dollar value is on a certified supplier. So could you please talk to us about how we can start working with you? And it's like, oh, okay, let me just get myself off the floor and back onto the chair. And these are big names that a small business like mine would never have access to. So having these tier one clients now, global, on our client base has really opened up a few doors. So it's been the best decision.
Amazing. As somebody who also has a small business, trying to get those initial switching from from outbound leads, to inbound leads is kind of a little bit of a holy grail in the sales
yes.
sphere.
Yes, it is. It's a game changer. And I think if it's a game changer for my business, it will be a game changer for many other businesses. I'm working on a particular platform which isn't quite ready at this moment to expand on that because it's too good. I'm not going to keep this to myself. I'd like to share it.
Totally. So the last kind of question I have is with this idea of you were working with Indigenous in other Indigenous businesses or businesses that were kind of in a minority in a sense. How can we ensure that we build logistics or just transport or businesses in general that harness the differences of others or view those differences as strengths or stepping stones to improvement instead of barriers, similar to the way that you've approached global forwarding?
Breaking down barriers is a conscious decision. That it's a good place to start. I think if individually we make those decisions and breaking down our own resistances, then as a collective, then we can do it in a much better way. And like I said before, business is a great way to break down those barriers, working together, because there are social and commercial visions that come together and create a reality.
Amazing. Well, Enrica, thank you so much for chatting to me today about breaking down barriers and just your personal journey into logistics and what is now your business. It was really, really cool.
Thanks, Emily, for the opportunity.
If you'd like to know more about Enrica or her company Global Forwarding, you can check out their website, which is globalforwarding.com.au. Nice and easy. Alternatively, if you want to know more about Byte Size or Compass IoT, the company that produces this podcast, you can visit our website, which is compassiot.com.au. Until next time.